Okay, we have made some changes in the cybersecurity. I told you guys before, trying to get those virtual labs approved, that our tech was looking at it, and the website that those virtual labs are on is not very secure, privacy-wise, which is interesting for a cybersecurity site. Not to really have a lot of security into it. So yeah, it's one of those little ironies of life that it's like, well, they don't keep information very secure. It's got some privacy leaks, apparently, according to our tech department checking that out. So we could never get that approved. So we have changed. Let me pull this up on the screen. So we are switching over to the Cybersecurity Essentials curriculum. So you should have both of those. I didn't want to delete the old one in case you want to go back and look at anything from last unit that we just finished, because those grades still apply. But we're switching over to the Cybersecurity Essentials course at this point, and probably use this the rest of the year. But we're going to start in their Module 2, Vulnerabilities, and they're going to do attack mechanisms and cryptographic algorithms, cryptography and digital signatures, and just, very, very similar stuff, certainly. Just looking at some different angles on that. So let's go to the grade screen. We're doing just the one lesson this week, 2.01, vulnerabilities. So let's go take a look at that. All right. The checklist, I think, just tells you what all lessons there are this time. So vulnerabilities. In the cyber world, a vulnerability is a weakness that can be exploited in an attack. We probably know that by now. We've talked about enough ways to let hackers get in your system. Once that vulnerability is exploited, an attacker can gain unauthorized access to a computer system. Everything is considered vulnerable in the cyber world. Hardware, software, networks, humans are all considered targets. So let's examine how cybersecurity professionals use system hardening, that's a new term, to prevent cybercriminals from exploiting technology.
Software update? I don't think so. Those annoying pop-ups and reminders about software updates are just another way to slow you down online, right? Not so fast. There's a good reason to run updates on your devices, but it's just one small step in identifying potential vulnerabilities in your system. A vulnerability is a weakness that can be triggered accidentally or exploited intentionally to cause a security breach. Keeping your software updated ensures that you are running all the latest security features available to identify vulnerabilities, but you can do more. Other vulnerabilities include improperly configured hardware or software, delayed software updates, testing failures, bad network design, and even weak passwords. Each one is an opportunity for hackers to gain access to your network and information through the use of digital footprinting. Footprinting is the first step in gathering information about a network's firewalls, IP addresses, VPNs, and even user email addresses and passwords. An attacker can use this information to find weaknesses in the network. Every open port, out-of-date software application, and weak password discovered during footprinting is an opportunity for access. A good cybersecurity plan includes multiple layers of protection, designed for maximum system hardening against footprinting that leads to cyber attacks. So while it may take a few extra minutes, run that update to start creating your secure digital environment.
All right, good information there. Vulnerabilities. Let's go to page 2 here. All right, system configuration vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities often lead to weaknesses, and this applies to everyday life and computer systems. But just like an unlocked car door leaves your personal property vulnerable, a simple error in a security setting could leave a company's entire network susceptible to attack. But with proper system hardening, let's see what the definition they give for system hardening. Techniques and best practices to reduce vulnerability in technical systems. system hardening. Network and computer security problems are easily preventable. Some steps typically used to harden the operating system include the following. Remove hardware access. We can click that. So remove access to unauthorized devices like USB ports and optical drives, because you can plug extra things in a lot of times. You see it in those movies where they have a little USB drive and they plug it in and it installs something and steals information from computers. You can actually turn those off, or your computer couldn't use that USB port if you have a system that you know is storing highly sensitive stuff. Test and install. Test and install operating systems and software patches and firmware updates. Restrict user accounts so they have the least privilege over the workstation. Right? Don't allow a lot of user accounts just to get into everything. Make sure they're only allowed to get into what they really need to do their job. That includes installing software and devices. I know here at the school, I cannot install new software on my computer. I cannot install new devices on my computer. They have that locked down. So only tech can do that. I have to contact them if I have something new I need on my computer. So they restrict the user accounts. And then antivirus, and make sure you install an antivirus software. Absolutely. So default values and technical controls, they're considered vulnerabilities because hardware like routers and company mobile devices may be configured with default administrative passwords and generic passcodes. So in the early 2000s, there was a phone hacking scandal took place in the United Kingdom. Journalists unlawfully accessed the voicemail boxes of celebrities and public figures using the default passwords of their phone accounts. In turn, they sold that private information from the messages to tabloids. You bet journalists are always trying to get information on celebrities, and they found a vulnerability. It might sound almost too simple, but a strong password is the first line of defense. Notice they still have the default passwords on their phones. Users and network security officials should always have unique passwords to protect themselves and their data. That's why Google checks if you're using the same password on multiple sites and say, hey, you're using this on, however many sites. It recommends you change it, because you're going to keep up with like 30 different passwords in today's society. Footprinting and port scanning. Footprinting is a technique used for gathering information about computer systems. This is the first step an intruder uses to obtain as much information as possible about a target. It's very useful to someone who's trying to penetrate an entire system. Attackers use the footprinting information to discover these items: what type of operating systems installed, user emails, addresses, and passwords, a detailed list of server configurations, to find out if there's a firewall, to find out the target's IP address, and if the target uses a VPN, and the security configurations of the target machine. So 2 types of footprinting: active and passive. Active footprinting is when a hacker gets in direct touch with the target machine. Passive footprinting means collecting information about a system that's in a remote location from a hacker. Now, it's important to note that not all that use footprinting are criminals. Ethical hackers also use this to find security flaws in the system, helping companies understand where they're vulnerable and reduce the number of possible attacks. I know the hackers that we see on YouTube, they will get in there and they will get a footprint of the scammer's computer system, find out how many phones are connected to it or how many computers are connected to it using a phone software, and can figure out exactly the whole footprint of their network. Port scanning is done after footprinting. The hacker enters the scanning phase. This is similar to knocking on a door to see if anyone's home. So running a port scan on a network exposes which ports are open, and listening, which means they're accepting data, accepting external data, if a port's open and listening. And it reveals the location of security systems that are located between the transmitter and the target. So did you know rules of engagement, or ROE, are the ground rules that guide the way that ethical hacking is performed? Here's examples of considerations addressed by these rules. How much time and money will be spent on testing? Will there be any limitations on what the hacker should test? Are there any legal restrictions like a non-disclosure or confidentiality agreement? So once they create the rules of engagement, then the ethical hacker can begin testing. All right, page 4. Denial of service attacks. We've read about these. A denial of service attack is likely a cybersecurity professional's biggest fear. These attacks can be extremely destructive and are often difficult to alleviate. So in a denial of service attack, legitimate users lose the ability to access servers like email, websites, online accounts, other important information systems. This kind of attack focuses on overloading a service by using up all the system resources like the disk space or the network bandwidth. It's also known as network exhaustion. You see these kind of attacks because they'll have all these different computers and they'll be sending request after request after request after request, so much that the system gets overwhelmed and shuts down. So other people trying to use that website or access that file on a computer, there's no space left for them to be able to make that request. These are carried out in many ways. The most common method involves an attacker flooding a network server with traffic. In this type of attack, the attacker sends several requests to the target server, overloading it with traffic. These service requests are illegitimate and they have fictional return addresses, which mislead the server when it attempts to authenticate the requester. As junk requests are processed constantly, the server becomes overwhelmed, which causes a denial of service condition for legitimate requesters. Individual networks may be affected by denial of service attacks without being directly targeted. If the network's internet service provider or cloud service provider is targeted, then the network will also experience a loss of service. So it can affect people otherwise using the same internet provider, but that internet provider has an attack on one of its websites and its servers are all taken up. I know some of these hackers I look at overwhelm and take over some of these hackers, some of these scammers' phone networks by sending 1,000 phone calls at a time at their network to where they can't make any outgoing calls because their network's overwhelmed with all these fake incoming calls. Distributed denial of service attack. In a distributed denial of service, multiple systems target a single system with a denial of service attack. The multiple systems used for the attack are often part of AB, which refers to a group of computers that have been infected with malware and are under control of the cybercriminal. Devices in a botnet can include computers, servers, mobile phones, tablets, other equipment, because all devices simultaneously send these denial of service attacks to a single target. Then the attack is faster and more difficult to block because it's coming from multiple places. All right, let's look at page 5. Symptom and prevention. Individual networks may be affected by denial of service and the DDoS attacks from multiple servers without being directly targeted. If the network's internet provider or cloud service provider's target attack, they'll experience a loss of service. So DOS attack can resemble standard technical problems with a network or a network administrator performing maintenance. So it may be hard to recognize. Signs of possible attacks, usually a slow network performance where your requests are taking a while for it to process. It's like, is it getting overloaded? Right? Is a website unavailable? That may be another thing where you're trying to load a website and it won't load, and it won't load. And you know you have an internet connection, but it won't load. It may be that internet provider or that website's getting a denial of service attack. So preventing these, this is possible with careful planning and proper security measures. Here's the security measures. First, install and maintain antivirus software. Because it could be they've installed a virus in there that's starting to really bump up a bunch of requests. Install a firewall, configure it to restrict traffic coming into and out of the leaving computer so it doesn't get overwhelmed. And evaluate security settings. Follow good security practices to minimize access that other people have. So it's important to understand that these attacks can happen to anyone, schools, businesses, government agencies, and even individuals. Well, it's more rare for an individual. It can happen. So, all right, that is our lesson for this week. Here's the summary. A cyber criminal continuously looks for vulnerabilities in the system. So using footprinting and port scanning, an attacker can discover a lot about a potential target. So a cybersecurity professional must understand how these tools are used in order to prevent an attack. So we can look real quick at the assignment. 1, 2, 3, 4, just 5 questions. All right, guys. Yeah, we'll be in this. This is actually supposed to be the course that follows the course that we're in. So this is actually the third cybersecurity, or second cybersecurity course. So, all right, guys, that's it. Got any questions? Hang around. Otherwise, have a great week. We'll see you next time.